Hello, everyone. I'm David Lansky. I'm lucky enough to be able to say that I'm president at ClubDA, and I would like to cordially welcome you to this co-event. This co-event is being organized by us, ClubDA, as well as our dear Rotary Club, whose Maria Teresia, whose home is at the Diplomatic Academy as well. And in the name of ClubDA, I would like to welcome you all to this very interesting speech and discussion that we are able to have with Monika Fröhler. I was lucky enough to actually meet Monika many years ago. It was in the year 2005. And during this year, I was a 19-year-old intern at the Austrian mission to the United Nations, the permanent mission of Austria in Geneva. And although it's many years ago, I still vividly remember many interesting conversations. And back then, I was very impressed with the personality that is Monika Fröhler, and from afar I was able to observe her truly stunning career that we will hear more about by Vera. But from my part, as hopefully many of you know, and if you don't know, now you know, the ClubDA is the alumni association for graduates of the Diplomatic Academy, as is Monika as well, by the way. So we are lucky to be able to call her a graduate of the Diplomatic Academy. Monika was at the DA apparently shortly before she went to Geneva, where I met her, and she did the so-called SPIS, which back then stood for Special Studies Program, special program in International Studies, which later merged to be the very well-known master's program MICE, the Master of Advanced International Studies. This being said, as you can see, we have numerous of fascinating personalities that stem from the Diplomatic Academy. And one of the most interesting ones for sure today is Monika. So Monika also, not only in the name of the club, but in the name of so to speak, of a face from a long time ago. A very warm welcome from my side. And I also want to, of course, also express our gratitude for this good cooperation with the Rotary Club. I wish you and us all a wonderful evening ahead with great discussions and talks. And without further ado, aside from apologizing that I can't be with you physically today, but in times like these, that's unfortunately not always possible. In my case, there was a vaccination breakthrough in the office. Now we are all tested and vaccinated, and everything is fine, but it's a matter of safety and respect for me to not attend at an event physically under those circumstances. But that being said, I want to without further ado, end those short words and pass the word on and pass the stage on to Vera Budway.
Thank you so much, David, and welcome everyone. My name is Vera Budway. I'm president of Rotary Vienna Maria Teresia, and we are really delighted to be here today. And I want to say a special thanks to David and ClubDA for this wonderful opportunity to have this joint event. I also want to welcome everyone, all of you who are joining us live on Facebook. It's a pity that we couldn't all be here today, but because of this, the circumstances, with COVID. I think it's great that we have this option that you can follow this very interesting talk. Very briefly, just on behalf of Rotary Maria Teresia, for those of you who don't know us, we are a very international club. We're an English-speaking club. We have over 30 members who are globally minded citizens, 1/3 of which are alumni of the DA. So we have this very special relationship with the DA. And one of our focus areas in Rotary, both from our club and Rotary International, is education and educating young people. So I just want to mention 3 specific initiatives that our club is doing to promote education. One is partnering with the Rotary Club in Rome International to cover tuition to allow girls living in Gulu, northern Uganda, to attend school. Again, this is a very important initiative for us to promote education, especially of girls. Now, closer to home here in the DA, we are now going to launch a mentoring program for DA students, which we would like to, as a club, support the students of the Diplomatic Academy, especially in their professional and personal development. And also, one of our latest initiatives that I would like to announce here as well is we will be providing a scholarship, a Rotary Vienna Maria Teresia scholarship for a Diplomatic Academy student in need. So this is something that we also feel very important and will help us really establish good ties with the DA, with the students, and also support education in the future. So without further ado, I'd like to now actually hand quickly to our program director, Ruth, who will formally introduce Monika, who we're so honored to have with us here today. So please, Ruth.
Thank you, Benno. I'm also really happy to be here at the Diplomatische Academy, and I also wanted to thank Andreas in the corner over there for all his technical expertise, and that David was also, and everyone is able to join online as well as those of us in person. So I have the honor to introduce Monika Fröhler, and we're really excited to have you both as a fellow Rotarian friend as well as a DA alumni. So you're a perfect speaker for our joint audience. And Monika is the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of the Ban Ki-moon Centre for Global Citizens. And as you know, Ban Ki-moon was the former Secretary General of the United Nations. He was also an ambassador here in Vienna. And I really love the title Global Citizens. So I think all of us also qualify for that. Monika is also a passionate change maker, advocate, founder, and speaker, as well as storyteller. So I think we're in for a treat today. She was entrusted to create the Ban Ki-moon Centre here in Vienna under the leadership of the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, as well as the former Austrian President, Heinz Fischer. After working for many years at the United Nations, the European Union, the Austrian Foreign Ministry, and in missions around the globe. And I'm not going to tell all the details, but she was she contributed to the Rio+20 and the Paris Climate Agreement, as well as the Sustainable General Energy for All initiative here in Vienna, and most recently COP26 last week in Glasgow. I know today she will talk more about it, but one of the, her passions is empowering young people and especially young women. So I'm glad to see some young women in the audience, and she's convinced, she's really focusing on empowerment, fostering leadership, and she's convinced that more people need opportunities to obtain global citizen values, SDG knowledge, and 21st century skills. And I'd also like to hear about what those skills are in this very dynamic world that we're in. She's also a recognized international gender champion herself, like I think Vera, our president, is, and a proud German Marshall Fund Fellow. And she was also a part of the Austrian Chinese Young Leaders Program. She studied here at the Diplomatic Academy, as I already said. She studied law, history, and economics. And I hope that you'll also maybe mention a little bit about some of how you got from the DA to where you are today. And without further ado, you have the floor, Monika. So nice to have you in person too. It's
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the kind words of introduction. I feel it's been overwhelmingly about my life, but yet I will tell you even more about it. And thanks for taking the time tonight to be with us, because we all probably had long days. So let me start with one question right away. Who of you considers themselves to be a global citizen? Hands up. So I think we all actually are. Who of you would also say that they are an SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, change maker already? Yeah, I have two hands, sort of. Mine is up, definitely. Yeah, interesting. I'm curious whether at the end of my talk, more hands will be up, because I believe actually many of you are, maybe unknowingly. So the Sustainable Development Goals and the Ban Ki-moon Centre are absolutely linked. Ban Ki-moon, you know, as the former Secretary General of the UN. And you have to imagine me as an alumni of the Diplomatic Academy, years after I have finished my academic studies here, I was suddenly asked by the boss of my boss, of my boss, of my boss, Ban Ki-moon himself, to found his legacy entity. And I do hope that particularly for the young students in the audience, that one of these moments will arise in your life. It was very special because it was a daunting thing to think about. But I boldly said yes. And that's my first message, particularly to the young ones today. When you are offered a chance, even if it seems utterly daunting, say yes, give it a try. Having said this, Ban Ki-moon wanted to have a foundation that is carrying forward his legacy. His legacy is very much coined by two landmark agreements, one of them the SDGs, the other one the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, please again give me a show of hands. Who of you feels familiar with these two agreements already? Excellent. I'm speaking to an audience that is totally in the know, which is great because only, they say, statistically, about 7% of humankind know about the SDGs, and that's too little. I mean, we are getting there. We are increasing the number of people who know, but not quite yet. So Ban Ki-moon told us he wants these two legacies to be taken care of. And he also said, the last years that I still have in my life, I want to be able to dedicate to youth and women. Because he saw these two segments of society, which constitute 75% of the global population, as underrepresented in the implementation of these two agreements. So we founded the Ban Ki-moon Centre. And what he said as well was he didn't only want his name. He was too humble to say that Ban Ki-moon, do you really want to call it that way? And we said yes, because it should be associated to you and your legacy. So we called it Ban Ki-moon Centre for Global Citizens. Global citizens, Ban Ki-moon sees as people who don't only care for themselves and for their nation, for their constituency, for their own well-being, but who see that their actions have a ripple effect to the globe. Sounds like quite an easy definition, but he was literally pointing at the time of our start of the center. He was pointing at I'm naming names like he did, the Trumps, the Bolsonaros, the Erdogans, the Dutertes, the Bolsonaros of this world, and said they are not acting in a global citizen mindset. And what we need is leaders who are actually completely knowledgeable about the SDGs, who carry global citizen values, and who will see the connection of all of that. And that's what the Ban Ki-moon Centre is for. We care for leadership of countries, of businesses, of communities, of cities, of individuals, for the SDGs and for Paris. And we want to assist a new generation of young leaders to become knowledgeable, and not only knowledgeable, but active on it. So let me start with 3 stories, because stories is what we can all relate to, and stories are what pretty much showcase how I got where I was and why I got where I am right now. Let me start with story number 1, and I hope that the clicker works. Yes, what you see here is Tajikistan. And what you see is mine experts who are demarcating a field that is just cleared from mines. Why do I show you this picture? It's my first story. I will tell you 3. Way back in 2000, and it must have been 3, I met Rehan. Rehan, I was in Tajikistan, in Dushanbe. Rehan was a very simple woman. She was a survivor of a mine accident. Rehan was a mother of, at that time, a 5-year-old girl. Rehan's story was very touching. I had organized a mine action summit in Tajikistan. And Rehan, after the days of victim assistance that had taken place, so there was a victim assistance workshop, and after the days had taken place, she came towards me. She didn't speak a word of English, and the translator came by and said, Monika, she wants to tell you her story because, Monika, you changed her life. And I asked, how, why? And Rehan started to tell me. She was married, processing back from the wedding ceremony to her village, and crossing a field like this. Mines exploded, her bridesmaids were harmed, she lost a leg, and her husband and the groom guys that were following them, they pretty much only saw the explosion, saw that as a bad omen, burst away, and the marriage was annulled. So it was completely void. Rehan survived. She lost one leg, but she was already pregnant at that time with a baby of her should-be husband. And she came back home to her family and was taken care of by them, but there was no physiotherapy. There was just nothing for her. She did survive as a victim, but she had to take care of her daughter somehow. She had to provide for her. She couldn't work on the field anymore. She couldn't do anything. She was in pain. So she started stitching and sewing to better her income, her private income. And she got so good at that she got more actually requests for sewing some things in the community than she could process. And now she came to my workshop years later. Her daughter was 5, was a healthy girl, but Rehan didn't have the financial means to send her to school. And now Rehan stands in front of me and says, Monika, you changed my life because with what I earn as per diem during this conference, and it was $300 that she got, I can buy a sewing machine. And with this sewing machine, I can actually cater the requests that I have and can get my girl to school. Next year, school will start and she will have a different life because of the $300 that I got from you. For me, it was a jaw drop moment because what are $300? But fact is, it changed her life, the one of her family and the one of her daughter. And she was hoping, she said she will work that her daughter knows enough about mines and knows enough about labor that she will not have to tread across a minefield, and she will do her utmost to care for her in the mindset of let's be thankful to those who lend us a hand. Next story is, Next story is one in Ghana that I encountered years later when I was working for Sustainable Energy for All, where I was visiting together with the Clean Cook Stove Alliance, school kitchens. And these school kitchens looked very much like this. The walls were totally black. And when you scratched the walls, you could see that the surface was actually the ash of what was just cooked. You can imagine that the ladies that are standing in these kitchens have lungs that look very much like the walls in these places. They call it the 3 brickstone cook stove, where just 3 brickstones are lying there on the ground and the wood is shoved underneath it. I was talking to Priscilla in one of these kitchens. Priscilla was a school cook and she was coughing. She was younger than I was, but she looked older than I was. And I asked Priscilla, how do you feel like inhaling that every day, day in, day out? And she said, oh, it's okay, I'm old. That's just a ripple effect of, I'm old. She wasn't aware of that cooking method actually causing her lung to get sicker and sicker and sicker. 2 million people, up to 4 million people, WHO estimates 4 million people die every year because of, prematurely, because of indoor air pollution. The Clean Cook Stove Alliance, with which I was working at that point, was working for getting kids in Ghana, in this case, clean food, where the cooks are also not harmed because of indoor air pollution. But that meant that the 3 brickstone cooking had to be substituted with LPG, so with liquid petroleum gas. What I saw from the first story was that small actions, like a very small action that I undertook, can change a life. In the second story, what I realized was that my understanding of what this horrible the horrible pollution that the woman was exposed to causes for her. I could make her understand that. And when Priscilla understood, she said, so you mean this is making me cough? She really didn't get that connection. And I said, yeah, well, let us work together. Let's get cleaner fuels for you at school. And we started that in Ghana in many schools, and we're actually quite successful. So to be able to put my understanding into the mind of someone else and have them then act on it was the second lesson that I learned. The third lesson that I want to give you as a global citizen lesson that I had was I met this guy, Hugh Evans. And Hugh Evans is the founder of the NGO called Global Citizen. And this is his story. And it's, to me, an utterly inspiring story. He was 17 when he traveled to the Philippines, and he met his guy, Sunny, who was the son of a waste picker in the Philippines. And he was shocked by the conditions, the cockroaches everywhere. They slept on the floor. The poor family shared the meals with them. But he said, how come that I, the privileged Australian, I don't have to suffer any of this? And Sunny, who by no fault is born where he's born, is poor. I want to make it the goal of my life to end poverty for my peers, like for all the 17-year-olds, because I can't change the whole world, but the 17-year-olds I can try. And so what he started was, this is years later when Hugh actually became utterly successful, he started in his Australian high school a concert effort where he was hosting bands. They performed for free, and he sold the tickets. That's how he started. He said, I want to sell the tickets, and the revenue that I create, I give to poor communities like Sunny's so that they can get out of the misery. That didn't create so much revenue, but he realized Bono was in town in Australia at one point in time, and he called Bono's management team and said, Bono, we have these school concerts with a global citizen mindset. We want to really eradicate poverty. Can you help us? And Bono, being Bono, said, sure, I'm gonna play for free. I'm gonna perform for free. Bono performed, told his friends about it. And in the meantime, Global Citizen is that. They are an NGO that is staging concerts worldwide, big ones in New York, in South Africa, in Paris, etc., where they have Shakira, Ed Sheeran, Beyonce, Jay-Z, Oprah Winfrey, Trevor Noah, WizKid, you name it. Really the elite of the entertainment business, Hugh Jackman moderating, doing that for free for global citizens who are in the audience and who get a ticket, not by paying, but by having done a global citizen deed. They enter that online, and they are then allotted a ticket for free. Ministers, prime ministers, presidents speak on the stage to announce new commitments towards the SDGs. And Hugh Evans and his friends have grown this from the small NGO of school bands to this massive entertainment industry, raising billions for the SDGs. And I'm really talking billions. They were active at the COP, they were active everywhere. What that story told me was that if you see a major challenge and you manage to see the opportunity in that challenge, you actually get way ahead. So Tajikistan taught me small actions. I think Ghana taught me share your understanding. Global Citizen told me see the opportunity in the challenge. Now, what does that mean for the Ban Ki-moon Centre? I sense that with Ban Ki-moon, I have a big, of course, reputation, legacy, and name that we have a foot in the door with a lot of people who we tendentially would probably not get an appointment with. From Bill Gates to Joe Biden to Mo Ibrahim, you name it, Ban Ki-moon is known. And how do you best utilize that if you are aware that leadership for the SDGs and global citizenship mindset is what is needed in the world of today? So what we do is, of course, this is our framework together with the Paris Climate Agreement, and I don't need to go into the detail why it is so important. It is a world governmental program, and it was adopted in 2015 by the whole 193 states of the UN. What we do is we saw there is a lack of government leadership for the SDGs and the Paris Climate Agreement. We also see that there is a lack of leadership development opportunities for young people and women. And we want to go into that space and do something about it. Our long-term goal is to implement and achieve the SDGs of the Paris Climate Agreement, long haul, 2030. And what we do as Ban Ki-moon Centre is we foster leadership with the values of global citizenship, particularly for women and youth. What have we accomplished so far? I'm proud to say that we have reached thousands of people. We do that by training young leaders. We have had cohorts here at the Vienna Diplomatic Academy, for example, but also elsewhere, from the Middle East, from Asia, from Latin America, from Africa. We are training them to become probably even more empowered and more active than they already are. All of them have an interest in the SDGs, that's how they are curated. We inspire them to do so-called SDG micro-projects. So we tell them, do spot the challenge at home in your own community, find a solution to that challenge, and become active. Don't look at the money that you have. Look at the network that you have. Look at the capacity that you have. Be knowledgeable about what is needed in your community. And these 143 SDG micro-projects that we accounted for in summer, in the meantime, we are at around 160, have reached 730,000 people. And this is from the reports that we get from our trained scholars and mentees and fellows who say, I have reached XYZ people with my activity. These activities pertain to gender equality, they pertain to renewable energy, water and sanitation, health, poverty eradication, reducing inequalities. So literally all of the SDGs. We did create online courses because it was, we were teaching the same things time and time and time again. So we created online classes so that the students could tap into that knowledge easily, and have reached in the meantime 56 countries, have lots of online followers, particularly young online followers, who again feedback us with what is going good, what is going well, what is not going so well. And we could actually recruit more and more donor organizations. And to take you a bit more into the depth of what we do on a day-to-day basis, Ban Ki-moon is very active on climate. We believe that adaptation has lost out in the balance of international consideration. There is a lot of effort and not enough on mitigation, so trying to keep the level of warming at the 1.5 and below the 2 degrees. That's mitigation, emission reduction. But adaptation, to adapt our societies to the already occurring hazards, is a bit of the neglected part of that equation. Now, COP26 has actually upped the numbers on adaptation. And what we see is that in adaptation, when you look at youth and women, how are they particularly hard struck by the non-happening adaptation? We sense that it is smallholder farmers and agriculture that is particularly neglected. So what we do is, with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, together with Global Citizen, who I introduced you to, together with the Global Center on Adaptation, IFAD, and many others, we are trying to scale financial and political commitments for adaptation. And indeed, at COP, 575 million euros, I think it is even, dollars, euros, I should know, 575 million have been committed towards CGIAR, I think it's the US dollar amount. And it has really become higher on the international agenda. But if you ask me, is COP, what we've witnessed at COP, is it enough? My bold answer is absolutely no. It is disappointing, very disappointing, because we will not hit the 1.5, we will not hit the 2 degrees probably, and people are already talking about end of the century 2.7, and other estimates say that we will have that earlier than end of the century. But we still are trying to do our utmost for smallholder farmers, because they carry the brunt of the burden, and they are those that emitted the least. Agriculture in the big scale contributes up to 25% of the emissions that we have globally. So we are talking big scale agriculture. Smallholder farmers, we are talking 2 hectares of land. Most of the women that are doing the work don't even own the land, and they can't take collateral on it because they simply don't have the rights to the land. Now, the smallholder farmers that we are trying to support, they need resilient crops, they need climate smart agricultural practices, drip irrigation, even more capacity building on forecasting the weather and having the access to markets. So it's very much very rudimentary kind of scale of agricultural benefits, but that's what we do, and increasingly hopefully get traction and attention. Another policy area that we are focused on is the Austrian government turned to us and said, how can we better implement the SDGs? You guys are experts on how to do that best. How can we do that? How can we reach students better, universities better, even governmental decision makers better? And they employed us to steer dialogues, to fuse the forces of academia and NGOs and also the Austrian governmental entities like ministries and the chancellery, and to accelerate our implementation. Now, Austria, fortunately, and I think I swiftly tell you the ranking that Austria has, Austria fortunately already ranks currently in 2021 as the 6th country worldwide when it comes to the SDG index and dashboard. For everyone of you who hasn't yet checked out Bertelsmann, it's a fascinating study on how the SDGs, how well they're implemented worldwide. For us, it's one of the statistics. There is an EU statistic, there is an OECD statistic, there's the Bertelsmann statistic, there's the ranking of the UN, which of course is just a very general one. So in Bertelsmann, Austria on 6th rank, but still there is room for improvement. And as you see, these are the sort of closer descriptions of the dashboards. Austria is the 2nd line. We are, as Austria, doing quite well on peace, justice, and institutions. We are doing quite well on affordable and clean energy, but we are not doing so well on responsible consumption and production. We are not yet there in climate action. No country is. And as Austria, we are also not so well considered to be in the gender equality sphere. So we have to work on these, and the pay gap and many other things come into being there. So we worked on these questions with multi-stakeholders and organized, helped with the report that Austria needed to hand in to the United Nations, but also conducted a dialogue forum in September this year. And hopefully the process will see more manifestation in parliament, in schools, in businesses. So we have big plans. Watch the space. The 3rd policy space that we are venturing into is one where the core idea of it is to transform learning and teach global citizenship education, GCED, and education for sustainable development in all levels of education, formal and informal. So we are talking primary school, secondary school, tertiary school. And you would be surprised how little climate or the SDGs are actually taught worldwide. Kids are asking for it, students are asking for it, professors and teachers are interested in it, but still there is no sort of formalized or no real evidence that it's at the level that we need it to for the transformations that need to take place. So what we are pushing for, and you see the Pope and Ban Ki-moon on that slide, what we are pushing for together with UNESCO and Columbia University, SDSN Global Schools, SDG Academy, with the blessing of the Pope, is to transform education and include climate change and SDG education everywhere. Again, a daunting task, very, very tricky. School systems change slowly, but we are trying our best to do that. And then, as was mentioned before, we do fellowships. The Diplomatic Academy is a key partner for that for us. We had cohorts from Latin America, Middle East, Asia, the ASEAN region, Africa, and we are focusing on different subject matters. Sometimes we are zooming in on one SDG with UNODC. We are zooming in on the peace, justice, and good institutions. With our partners at the Global Center on Adaptation, we are zooming in on climate change. We are sometimes focusing on all of the SDGs to become first change makers as young students and just see, is it gender equality that fascinates you and that is your passion? So these fellowships, as you have seen before in the statistics, have led to many SDG micro-projects that have reached a lot of people. And you can imagine this is our grassroots level engagement. If you divide our work, the policy interventions that I told you about, so the UNESCO bit, the one with the smallholder farmers and the one of advising Austria, is about 60% of our work. 40% of our work are the fellowships, the scholarships and the mentorships. And we too have a mentorship program that last year, this year, we particularly focused on global health because of COVID, where we work with European universities. In our scholarship program, we are working also with European universities, but also RELEX, a private sector partner, to get scholars pitching their ideas and not only that, but to put them in very exposed positions at the UNGA, at various meetings where they can amplify their doing and hopefully, and in many cases it worked out, get funding. And some of them have now founded NGOs in their own right. So the micro project of our scholars grew into NGOs in Africa, in the Middle East, and in Asia in the meantime. The SDG microprojects, I already spoke about them. They are probably at the core of being active in country. And to return to my 3 stories that I started with, the SDG microprojects for me are often informed or inspired by the lessons that me, my staff, and those change makers that we meet on the road have made. And to summarize, and maybe this is the last thing that I want to give you, is very much, even if you don't consider you are a change agent. In fact, taking the fact that small actions, very small actions, already do count. And I'm not talking about only $300 to Rehan and the sewing machine, but I'm talking your decision as a consumer. I'm talking about your decision on what you study. You told me before that you're at LSE and that you're studying for international development. And that in itself is a decision that will shape your future, that will contribute to exactly that. So to me, you are a change maker by your choice of what you want to dedicate your life to. So first, small actions. Secondly, generate understanding in others of what you have already understood. I am often stunned by the very fact that something that I take for granted, the other one hasn't yet comprehended. This is my daily bread and butter. In my family, it's not the daily bread and butter. So I am talking to my cousins, my uncles, my aunts about that as much as I talk about it to you. And then the third lesson is really have an entrepreneurial mindset, because the bigger the challenge that we are facing, the bigger the opportunity is to solve it. And this is something that I had to learn as well. And this is my last piece of career advice. Don't wait for a job to come up for you. Create it yourself. And I know that sounds crazy, but it has worked in my life. And the Ban Ki-moon Centre is a sample of it. Yes, I was in the lucky position of having done many things before that, and having had the education at the DA, and having had exposure at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I was at the UN. But I have only said yes to everything. And when they asked me, can you create a quasi-international organization? I said, yes, I'm going to learn. And I did. And I know that the people that are gathered in this room all have this capacity to be a change maker in their own right. So thank you very much for your attention and your understanding. And I stand ready to answer any questions. Please go ahead.
So I really appreciate.
And maybe introduce yourself briefly.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, everyone who'd like to ask a question, it would be great if you introduce yourself.
So my name is Sharon Ehrlich. I am an American and I've been living in Austria for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And I work in IT. My question is about how you close your presentation by saying, actually all of us are probably doing videos.
Yes.
And I can say that, yeah, I have been doing a bit of something, but I also get distracted by the day, by working, by my obligations to my family, and sometimes find it very, very difficult. And I would say in this particular phase in my life, I would say this year I have done almost nothing that's measurable. What kind of words of support and encouragement could you give to people like me, because of us who are feeling that way, so that we find a way to forge ahead in spite of everything else that we have going on in our lives?
I love that question, because I get it a lot of times that people say, I have the feeling I'm not doing enough. And I would want to contribute my time and my efforts to something bigger. I can only say that indeed many of you are doing it. It might not be enough, but in your own understanding, but don't be too harsh on yourself. Because if you look at that, I don't know if you're a mom or not, but if you are a mom, then it's very likely that you are giving your child or your children every chance for quality education. And by being able to spend time with them, and by being able to showcase your example of how you live a responsible life, make responsible consumer choices, maybe think about, do we really need that trip, or do we rather stay in country? Where can we save? By already doing that, you are a teacher like many other kids would actually need across the globe. Is that satisfactory enough for you in IT? Maybe not. But you in IT have skills that many entities actually lack. And I don't know how much time you have at your disposal, but if you see, for example, Rotary, or if you see another entity like there is Teaspoons for Change, there is Global Citizen, there are the Scouts, of course. There are so many that actually want to harness the power of the wider mass. Do me the favor, if you really just say you set aside 5 minutes per week, check out the Global Citizen website. It doesn't take too much effort, and you will read the stories of how you, by writing a petition to this and that governor or American politician particularly, how you can alter policy that will eventually affect hundreds, even thousands. So if you want to scale your effort, it's often very wise to associate yourself with a bigger entity. Amnesty International, similarly, if you dedicate 5 minutes a week to just check what is the latest petition that I could sign to help a prisoner who is unrightfully in prison to actually get justice. If you do that, you are already acting as a global citizen, and don't be too harsh on yourself to say, oh my God, I should do this and that and the other. Sure, there is always, and I'm blessed in my life that I can make this my day in, day out work. But believe me, I'm also struggling at times thinking, how do I best use my time to scale what we are doing? Is it too little? And a good friend of mine, Darcy, he's a wonderful speaker. I can only recommend, if you Google him, you will find Darcy with his NGO, Teaspoons for Change. And it is exactly the message that I have for my fellows, my scholars, my mentees. Don't believe that you can only contribute if you think grand. Start small. Neighbors are quarreling. An elderly lady opposite needs help. You see children that actually would need after-school care and they don't get it. It's these small acts of community doing that eventually, if you sum them up, contribute to this. And I truly believe that. Now we instruct the scholars and the fellows and the mentees to think a bit bigger and to spot a challenge. Is your school already recycling? And if it's not recycling, is the system there to at all receive the recycled bits and bobs? Is your university looking out for gender parity on the panels, in the faculty, in the classes? If not, found a committee and demand it and set like a rule book that is then handed over to the faculty leadership. So there are so many things that once you become an active entrepreneurial kind of mind, and you tell yourself, if I don't do it, no one will do it, I think you can find thousands of things that where you feel rewarded in a short time, and that actually, as I said, contribute to this. Yeah.
I'm Sophia. I'm from Honduras, and I'm a second-year student at the TA.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I was really inspired by it. As a young woman about to graduate from the DA, I've been looking at my options after I graduate, and I was very inspired by your presentation. It is something that I feel like doing effective change on a bigger scale, especially coming from a country from Honduras. So sometimes I feel a bit overwhelmed or lost about where to start, what my choices are, what can I do as a young person career-wise in order to affect this change ultimately. Yeah,
I feel you. I have been in the same position. And the way that I approached it was, and I'm not saying this is the only way or the right way, it was mine, that I became interested in biographies and characters who were inspiring to me. And I checked them out and saw what were the steps that they undertook. And when I was really lucky, and the DA actually helped in this one, these people came as speakers, as lecturers, or I could somehow get in touch with them. And it might be, again, scary, but do get in touch and ask them for advice. And be ready to say how you could contribute to them, because this is my strategy. It was all my life. I wanted a summer job, and I had a look exactly. It was a school, and I wanted to teach at that school, and I saw what do they lack and what do I have that I can offer them. And I wrote this long application letter where I said, and I can do with your kids, with your students, this and that and the other. And the director, like the headmaster, called me afterwards saying, we were not intending to employ anyone, but your offer was very appealing. So how much would you ask for? and I got the job. Similarly, for my mine action activities, that job didn't exist. And it happened that they needed someone who spoke European. It was the implementation support unit of the Landmine Convention, and it was led by a Canadian. And he said, "You're European, you have worked for the Commission, you've worked for the Austrian presidency, you've worked for the Portuguese presidency. Do you speak European?" And I said, "I think I do. What do you need from me?" And he then said, "Well, I have no clue about Europe, Commission, Council. I don't understand it. Tell me what you know and how we can make this fit into a council resolution that will then galvanize money that can then actually employ you." We did that. So I asked for the money to be paid, basically, but I had to generate it and I had to invest. So invest means that my poor parents at some points in time had to sustain my livelihood. And that was possible to a certain degree, but I did side jobs to earn my living as well. And I invested into internships. I'm not a fan of unpaid internships at all. We pay our interns at the Ban Ki-moon Centre because I think it's a ripoff. But sometimes if you are very strategic, you have figured out, okay, this is an entity I would really love to work for. This is what I have to offer. This is the person that is leading that entity. I want to speak to her, to him. I want to get to know them. I want to show my interest. I volunteer for this event, the other event. I'm just there. You will see doors open, or at least this has been my case. Pitch for yourself, learn, so to say, to sell yourself, but also be sure what is a key passion of yours. I know you have made the right choice when you're waking up in the morning and you love to go to work and you want to do more. Or like today, my staff in the meantime is back home, and I knew that I would come to the DA to talk about the Ban Ki-moon Centre, and I was like, yes, I can talk about it again. Then you have found your right job, I guess. Yeah. Any other questions?
Maybe just a comment that Piero Sidon with the UN Migration Agency.
Yeah.
Very inspiring talk we heard from you. Thank you very much. I was particularly taken by a topic that I'm also very passionate about, education, because young people of today are the electors of tomorrow.
Yes.
And somehow the concept of climate change, very important. For us, it's of course migration, connected also to climate change, but it also means multiculturalism, multi-religion, multi-race, multi-gender, whatever, but it's about diversity in the world and sort of teaching young people about this. And I had an experience in Switzerland. It's so difficult to. There were so many players, not just the ministries, but in some places we have the regional authorities, the district authorities, etc., etc. What's your experience in this? I mean, getting to high schools and not the high schools, maybe the entities that run the education programs in the nation.
Thanks for the question, because what I do see is that the different levels in education are reacting in different ways and in different speeds. The velocity is very different. When I talk to students, and we have several workshops and seminars, age group, let's say 14 to, I'd say up to 30, like advanced students, their interest in the SDGs and the Paris Climate Agreement is omnipresent. They know, and they want to become active on it. For them, our intervention is more one of trying to inspire them to take action and to feel that they have the right to be at the table. Even now at COP, what we saw was that the summit, the leaders' summit, was very separate from what was happening in the action zone, where the NGOs and the indigenous and the youth was represented. We were in the action zone, so we were with those that we are representing. We do have, of course, a segue to the Leaders' Summit thanks to Ban Ki-moon and his influence. But Yet I feel with them that they are not represented at the table. And as I said before, it takes these little grains of input time and time again in student groups, in universities, in primary schools, that eventually a leader comes up who will then be an NGO leader, probably a business leader, probably someone who is teaching others, who intrinsically has this mindset. And I'm already happy if I reach 1 or 2 in a class that really take that to heart and act upon it. This level is easy. It is vast. 75% of humankind are women and youth taken together. 50% of humankind is below the age of 26. So getting that right now means that the planet hopefully will be better off in the future. Do we have that time? Don't know. The segment of schools is a difficult one. Schools are very much in a formalistic way connected to the various educational strategies of the country. Reaching the teachers, again, is often even data protected and limited. You can't send emails to all of the teachers, but you need to go via the entities and the institutions, and then only one ombudsperson in the school gets it, and then you have to rely that the information is transported to the teachers. So to reach them is difficult. Teachers' unions are easier, and teachers' unions do have a better connectivity to the teachers than going from one single school to the other. What we have learned for schools, particularly, that teachers and also professors crave online material, because right now in the interconnected world, quality online material is sought after. Harvard University, Columbia University, SDG Academy that I spoke about before. There are a couple of institutions that I can absolutely vouch for. Harvard with Professor Reimers has phenomenal courses on global citizenship. Columbia has a fantastic resource with SDSN, which is the Sustainable Development Solution Network, multitude of universities that have curricula, that have lectures ready-made. And yet we are still working with UNESCO and SDSN and the others on spreading the word even further and pointing to the resources that already exist, not to duplicate. However, having said this, much of the resources are in English, and much of it is in French and Spanish, maybe, not in Arabic, not in African local languages, and it does need to be localized. The funding for that doesn't exist, and even the knowledge of bridging that often doesn't exist. So that's a very crazy field. And when then you're talking to ministers of education, different playing ground, because they want to have short-term gains. Within their tenure of the 4 years that they have, they want to have made a big difference so that probably the prime minister or whoever is getting them into the post will get them into the post again. And they need short-term gains. But what we have witnessed, and I want to draw the attention of some of you who might not have realized, Greece right now, Greece of all countries, has made an educational reform happen in the past couple of years, and we're really talking 1.5 years, that, wow, is an inspiration to many other European countries. A young educational minister, Niki, she was looking at what are the jobs that are currently missing in Greece. She was doing a big survey. What is the labor force currently, the future labor force taught, and what do we actually need? And she saw that there was a big disparity. And what was needed was technological skills, web design, IT, mathematics, algorithm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What was taught was something quite different. So she said, whoa, we have to shift and have to create skill labs in the school where these skills that are leading to employment later on are fostered. But she also saw that the segment of tourism in Greece, of course, is a massive one, and that fewer and fewer Greek students went into tourism. They got foreigners who did the touristic stuff. And she said, let's do skill labs where we particularly focus on IT, digitalization, AI, programming, developing, but also on tourism services and how you can create a business out of that. Within a short period of time, she'd managed to change. Is that the normal kind of way of how things go? Absolutely not. And we are talking about governments that are very slow in changing any curriculum. I don't know if you know Richard David Brecht, the German thinker and philosopher. He's talking very eloquently about how our schools are not equipped to teach for future challenges. And unfortunately, this is a pressing issue. And you pointed out correctly, migration. will increasingly become a reality. We have climate hazards that will definitely be the cause for massive internal displacement, but also, of course, refugee moves. Is the world, are the kids of today prepared for that? No, they're not. Do we therefore need to teach this and the Paris Climate Agreement? Yes, we do. Because the causal connections of all of this need to at least be in the consciousness. Let me add, someone is considered to be a good speaker and remembered if they manage to appeal to the logos, the ethos, and the pathos of the people. So if they appeal to cognition, if they appeal with the ethos to the value system, and with pathos to the emotion of the people. And it's similarly with this, that you, be it the minister, be it the teachers union, or be it the student, if you manage to talk to them on the logos level, fine. If you manage to talk to them on the ethos level, this is the value that you should stand for as a global citizen. You have won it almost, but only if you trigger their emotion, their pathos, then you will achieve anything. Ruth.
Thank you so much, Monika. Following up on Pierre's question, a lot of Rotary clubs, including ours, invest in girls' education. And you talked about the Tajik young woman who wasn't able to go to school, for example. So I just wonder, and also, of course, Rotary has a consultative status at the United Nations. So I was just wondering, you know, how you bring your Rotarian side of you into your work and cooperation. Yeah.
Girls' education and reproductive rights are key to the well-being of the planet. And you probably, this was something that surprised me utterly, talking about climate change. Many times technological solutions are put at the fore. And people say, oh, we need more solar panels and we need more hydro and we need more this and that and the other, because politicians love to cut the ribbon of a new solar plant. The one most effective measure against climate change, believe me or not, is girls' education and reproductive rights. And this is the case because we as a population are growing and growing and growing and growing. Predictions say that in 2050, we will probably be 12 billion people on the globe. And 12 billion will be difficult to sustain. And only if we get the reproductive rights of girls around the world right, and only if we get health care right, we will actually manage to keep it at levels that are bearable for the planet. Sounds harsh, but is a fact. So one of the most effective measures that you can actually contribute to is girls' education and reproductive rights. However, what we see is in India and many other countries, child marriage is happening daily. What we see in Africa is that female genital mutilation is happening on a daily basis. What we see in the European and Western context is no equality of men and women when it comes to pay or when it comes to the power positions in government or in the private sector. So there is a great discrepancy there as well. What we see in Latin America is that we have lots of female human trafficking, prostitution, violence against women that is at levels that is unbearable. Helping ladies, educating girls is, I think, something that I will do my life long, because I truly believe that we need to get equity worldwide. I'm proud to be an international gender champion like you are, and I have made a couple of commitments in that regard to foster like equal panels, for example, that I speak on panels that are representing male and female voices equally. I have vouched for sexual harassment training for every staff member, obligatory, and I can only recommend that that should be implemented in any institution. I have vouched for that I would always be a proponent of having ombudswomen somewhere as a point person to turn to. I'm very engaged in the violence against women, like Stopping Violence Against Women campaign, Orange the World. If you don't know about that, please check it out, Orange the World. We are lighting buildings in the days of activism between the 25th of November and the 10th of December. We're lighting them in orange so that people start talking about why is the St. Stephen's Cathedral orange and why is this bridge orange, to trigger the Orange the World notion of violence against women is everywhere. Let's help our female friends. Let's involve the men. Let's get the men on board. Tell them that it is a problem. Have them as a partner in the fight against violence against women. Caring for hospitals. There was the focus in the Orange the World campaign a year ago. Hospitals have ombudswomen who take care of and often voluntarily, it's nurses and doctors who do that on top of their actual work, who care for the women who come into the hospital and show signs of physical violence. And you have to be very careful, tread carefully with them, because you can't necessarily ask, are you beaten by your husband? Or have you been molested by? Many would be very reluctant to give in to such a thing, but you have to tread carefully and probably ask something like, who would you not want to visit you in hospital? Maybe then you get a name or get a hint, and pretty much be an open source for them to turn to, but not necessarily immediately point them to police or to something that might scare them off. And we had the action of fusing hospitals and seeing how these nurses and doctors are conducting that. And believe it or not, there is no code of conduct. They are not necessarily talking to each other. They didn't know how the hospital in Tyrol was doing it when they were doing it in the hospital in Vienna. So it's things like these, Ruth, and I know I'm going into a tangent of a million of answers. Girls' education and reproductive rights. If the Rotary clubs like yours can focus on supporting Ugandan girls to go to school, the direct correlation between keeping a girl at school and giving her education and like lowering the likelihood of her being married off early, of her having difficulties in her pregnancy, of her bearing more children than she can actually support, of her being malnourished and the children being malnourished, of her being just used for household chores instead of doing her own career and becoming self-sustainable, is very much higher than if she stays at school. So paying the school fees for a girl for just 1 or 2 or 3 more years, I think should be something that every Rotarian should think about and that every Rotarian should do. Every person that can afford the €5 that it takes should do. So I'm happy to hear that you're doing that in Uganda. My Rotary Club has opted for different efforts, but I'm occasionally sneaking in, why don't we do that? And why don't we do this? So let's see, maybe one day.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really, that's inspiring. And I couldn't really agree more that education is the key. And exactly what we're doing in our club, it's so little. I think, for less than €300 a year, we can send a girl to school, pay her fees, and provide her with food in school. That's so little for us, but it makes a world of a difference. And that's exactly what you said. I'm thinking of your Tajikistan story at the very beginning. But what I wanted to say, what's really, for me personally, concerning when I look at gender equality, or even if we talk about global citizens, is what I'm noticing that there's a backlash. There's a backlash against gender equality, which is alarming. And also, there is a trend, a backlash against this idea of being a global citizen, of globalization. I come from the United States, so I have a recent experience with seeing this. But we see it in many places in the world. This more inward-looking, from starting with the politicians that are looking inwards, that are actually promoting, instead of being a global citizen, looking at the nationalist rhetoric, which is really then endangering exactly what we're trying to achieve here. How do you?
This actually brings me back to what Ruth mentioned at the beginning, the famous 21st century skills, and also the point that was raised by our colleague from the IOM about education. What we do need in our curricula is the 21st century skills of team building, cooperation, conflict resolution, communication. And that sounds, obvious, but it is not taught. We are not taught how to resolve conflicts when we have one in class. We are not taught how to communicate that so many cultures, very different backgrounds, can relate to what we say and can understand us. We are not necessarily taught how to think critically in schools. We need to reproduce, still now, need to reproduce what we have been taught. That will be outdated soon enough. We are not as good as the machines in reproducing data. But what we are good at is creativity and a critical mind. Good at, not good at, you can argue with the echo chambers that are currently created, particularly on social media. But these soft skills, critical thinking, team building, communication, conflict resolution, etc., what is considered to be a byproduct of good teaching will actually be the one thing that keeps us away from, or that gives us the headway towards machines. They will be the better calculators. We are relying, I don't know if you have read Noah Harari. Have you read his 21st Lessons of the 21st Century? Where he says, it's one of his big takeaways, we are becoming less religious worldwide, tendentially. We become tech savvy, and he calls it a tech religion. When we have a scan done of our body, we are not necessarily trusting the doctor who gives us the verdict of what it is, but we are trusting the machine who can counter it with thousands of files and has seen, I don't know how many copies of breast cancer before. The doctor is fine, but we rely on the algorithm more. Similarly, even when we are looking for partners nowadays, we are going to whatever the platform is called, but from Tinder to whatever is out there, we are relying on algorithms to sort out a match that is perfect for us. So we become technologically religious. We have a tech religion coming up. We are relying on search machines for finding the cheapest flight. And we believe we rely on that more than on the person in the travel agency, where we feel that they're probably charging us in addition. So there is a tendency to become tech abiding, so to say, which is understandable and will be the trajectory. However, what we have to be conscious of is that data is the new currency. Who has data is rich, and those that are monopolizing it will need to be put under some kind of regulation, because otherwise the monopoly, I think, will get too strong, but that's my personal opinion. But data is the new currency, and we have to somehow balance this dynamic by particularly drawing on our humanistic skills and on our communication, conflict resolution, team building, collaboration skills. Are we excelling at it? If you ask me, looking at COVID, we have a long way to go. And COVID is a easy task put in front of us. Climate is the much bigger one. And are we currently failing it? Yes, we are. Does it mean that we would need more collaborative efforts, more communication, more working together on things? Yes, we would. Let's start with ourselves, honestly. It's the only way. And of course, for those of you who aspire to become politicians, do it. Do it. And CEOs of companies, because you, of course, the higher you rise in the social hierarchies, potentially the more people you can influence.
Thank you so much. This was really great. We really, I think all are inspired and lots to think about for sure. And I really like to keep in mind the little things we can do to really make a difference. And on that note, I would like to invite everyone to continue the discussion, the conversation outside. There's a small reception with some wine and cheese. So thank you very much, and we can continue the conversation outside.